Welcome back to Following Noah on a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 101, and we are finishing Dawnshard today, and we will be starting Rhythm of War next week. We've got quite a bit to talk about this week, but first of all, Eliot, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. We are starting our second century worth of episodes, so this is exciting stuff. Episode 101.
Episode 101, we finally have a fairly good definition for Dawnshard. Paul, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you for asking, Trevor.
Have we disproven all of your Dawnshard theories? Have we improved any of your theories, Paul?
I think it's safe to say that I've been right all along.
You usually are.
I think it's safe to say.
Can I get 2 words to summarize chapters 16 through the epilogue of Dawnshard? We'll start with Paul.
Yes, my 2 words for the end of our book here is art and reordering.
Okay. Reordering art. Eliot?
My two are want and need.
Okay. Let's use these 4 words and finish Dawnshard. All right, Paul, go ahead and go first.
So art is pretty quick and easy reference to our Dawnshard we see. It gave me a lot of artistic energy, and it seemed just like it was a piece of art that latched onto Risen. We'll talk about that. And also, it feels like it makes Risen see things in a much more like artistic or vibrant way, which I thought was really cool. My other word is reordering, which mostly has to do with the words of our Windrunners who say their ideals, and how it's the ideals we've heard before, but in different lights or different ways, sort of. So kind of like redoing those a little bit, making them more personal to each of our characters. Also, kind of a bonus mention to the agreement or like discussion between Risen and Nickley, because I wasn't expecting this, or at least how it happened, and it felt like kind of a stretching the word a little bit, like a reordering of how the Sleepless are interacting with the world itself, like the people in the world and everything. Yeah. So like kind of a shout out to that, which we'll talk about more.
Eliot?
My 2 words are centered around one quote from chapter 19, which is actually a quote of Rissen's Babsk. What's his name? I don't
Vistim?
remember now. Yeah, that guy. As Rissen is going through this negotiation, she's trying to figure out how do I do this? How do I convince these sleepless, these powerful beings that to do what I want them to do, to have them not kill me? And part of how she reasons through that is actually really clever. But the quote is, "Don't give them what they say they want. Give them what they need," which is a really interesting business strategy, if you will. It goes against kind of the traditional, mentality you might have, which would be like modern marketing, which is, tell people what they want and then give them what they think they want. This is like the opposite. This is no, go deeper. Find out not what they think they want, but what they actually need, and then give them that. Which I thought was fascinating because that ties in directly to the punchline of the whole story, which is spoilers for end of the book here, Risen becomes the Dawnshard, which gives her the power to change. And I stewed on that little phrase there, power to change, for a long time until I thought back to this quote, which is why I had to bring it up. If you think about it, that giving someone what they need and not what they want, that is changing someone. If you just give them what they say they want, what they're asking you to give them, you didn't change them at all. You didn't affect them at all. You met their desire, but they didn't change. If you can show them what they really need, you just changed them in a subtle way, in a positive way. And so Risen already has this power to change people. She wields it in this story. But now she has the Dawnshard, which is what we're told is the power to change. So now I'm envisioning this like becoming magnified, and the abilities she's about to have here. I'm really, really curious about where Risen goes from here and what this is going to look like with her having this whatever it is in her head. So that's a very long-winded explanation, my 2 words, but we can talk about it more when we get through the chapters.
The want versus need quote originally comes from Vistim teaching Risen about contracts. And anyone can sell anyone what they think they want. But in order to establish a reliable contract, you need to supply something that they need so that they come back to you and you can have a good relationship there and but mutually beneficial. If you trick someone into thinking they need this and they buy it from you, yes, you've succeeded that one time, but if you actually figure out what they need and can supply that, then both of you are benefiting from it, and that's part of the whole trade contract. So I really like that you picked that. We'll come back to that. Chapter 16. We left off 2 weeks ago now, episode 99, with jumping into the water when Nickley has invaded the ship. Cord yells at Nickley and Horneater, grabs Risen, and jumps off the boat. Cord then quickly, it's just the narrator talking actually. Cord sees the Luxbren diving under this tunnel that Chiri went earlier, and they start swimming down there, and Cord's fairly good at swimming and can pull Risen along with her. And the Luxbren help them through this tunnel. They push them through this tunnel under the island, and they come up under this underground chasm and pull out their spheres and figure out they're in this treasure trove. Now there's a whole bunch of stuff in here which we can unpack here in a second, but there's all sorts of cool stuff, and the Luxbren have guided them down in here where Chiri went. So what were you guys' first impressions of this underground chasm where there's this big mural, which we'll talk about here in a second?
I was a little bit confused at first of like, how far were we swimming? Because in my mind, we're like underneath the island somewhat, like not underneath the entire island, but like had to swim down to like come up into this underwater area. And yeah, I guess I was a little bit surprised that we got there. Like I just wasn't expecting this at all. I was expecting to find more of like a secret tunnel thing from the island, not like a place you had to swim under from outside, I guess. But it's neat. I was surprised.
I too was a little bit surprised. We were talking about this last episode a little bit. It seemed like the water was not a great choice to escape from these, hordes of Kremlings, but the Luxbren seemed to come to their aid here to help them along. And I actually had to do a little bit of a rethink about the Sleepless a little bit, because by the end of this, we'll talk about this more in a little bit, we learn that the Sleepless are not from Roshar, at least originally. And so I had to shift my brain a little bit, and that I think of everything on Roshar as a crab, right?
Right.
We talked about this before. Everything is a crab. So automatically I'm thinking, Kremlings, crabs. These are just little crab beings. Maybe that's not true. Maybe that's not actually true here. I think when I read the word Kremling, I immediately think little crab. But I had to remind myself that's not necessarily true. We've learned that they use the term Kremling to kind of refer to anything like small and scampery.
Right.
And so, like, just how there's other words that they use them in much more generic sense that maybe we think about them. And so I actually had to do a little bit of a mental correction, and that maybe not these sleepless may not actually be made up of crabs, and maybe more like, insect sort of things almost. They actually in the story like correct Risen at some point, or maybe it's Cord, and like, excuse me, we actually prefer to be called hordlings, not
Yes.
gremlings, which was a great moment. So now I'm kind of, maybe they're not quite as adept underwater as I would expect them to be as, Rosharians, because they're not Rosharans.
They do say they're specifically here because the Dawnshard is here. That's the only reason why they're still on Roshar, is to protect the Dawnshard. So, yeah, the Kremling is just anything that is small and scary. So, if it's a crab, great. If it's an insect, great. If it's, whatever, small mammal, still a Kremling. All right, we get a vocabulary dump in chapter 16. There, Risen and Cord show up to the mural, and Cord doesn't seem that interested in the mural, but the mural specifically catches Risen's eye, and Cord's over here trying to get this shard plate to work that she just found, because they're being chased by Sleepless, and she feels she needs to defend herself. Risen goes over to this mural and gets distinct impressions in her mind as if it's a thought from someone else, is how she describes it. So she originally thinks she's getting these impressions herself, but she realizes it's an external force pushing thoughts onto her mind, is how she describes it. And it gives a very, it gives impressions and words, keywords in her mind. And they are as follows: resignation, confidence, understanding in italics, change is how it ends. And at the end of 16, right as the Kremlings, right as Nickley is coming out of the water, it kind of pulls onto her mind and says, accept the change. And she says yes. She audibly says yes. Zip, it jumps from the mural to her head. And Nickley doesn't realize that until halfway through the next chapter, but she seemingly extracts the Dawnshard from the mural after she audibly says yes to it. So there's a couple new mechanics happening here. What are your guys' questions?
So my first is less of a question and more of a emotion, thought. All of this time, we've been trying to track down Dawnshards. We've been trying to figure out what they are, what they do. We've been suspicious about anything and everything that we've seen. And here we get to it. Risen is standing in the room, facing the Dawnshard on the wall in the form of this mural. And then somehow it attaches itself to Risen. It like enters her mind. And I found myself thinking at the end of all of this, I don't know that I really understand what a Dawnshard is. We found it. It's here. But I don't know that I can really tell you what it is, because it's still ambiguous in my mind. So frustration, that's the emotion, frustration.
Okay, I have two thoughts and neither of them are about Dawnshard, our book.
Okay.
But about stuff we've read before that I was thinking of. So I'm just going to share those. It's probably whatever. I'm just going to share them. One, the description of the art and kind of what was happening reminded me. It gave me the similar imagery to when we were seeing Shalon's backstory and like seeing the like glow from behind. Was it from the like inside a box or whatever? Like in my head, it gave me a lot of the same imagery,
Mhm.
which probably isn't the case, but that's literally where my mind went instantly. I was like, is Shalon also a Dawnshard? But there's that. And then second is I'm also wondering if somehow I'm trying to figure out why Renarin is so important, and my thought is since these Dawnshards are apparently what can help destroy Odium, or like at least do something of that caliber. And we know Renarin has to have a big part in this story as of the end of Oathbringer, so I keep thinking that maybe he is as well. That's all my thoughts. That's not helpful,
So-
but that's like what I was reminded of when we were reading this. I don't have that much judgments to make off of this because, like Elliot, I'm still struggling to figure out what this actually is or what's actually happening.
So there's a lot of good stuff here. I'm really glad that where you're going with this. There's a couple key words that can help you define Dawnshard in your head. And Nickley drops a few, Rison drops a few after she picks up the Dawnshard and can kind of explain to the reader what's happening in her head. Capital C command is said. Intent with a capital I is said. And change with a capital C is said. So where have we seen capital C command before? Go ahead.
Is that this just popped into my mind. I did not think about it before. Is that like the term they use in Warbreaker for like imbuing something with
Yes.
breaths?
Yes.
Is they command it? Okay.
Who's
I
got a
hadn't-
command on Roshar?
I don't know, but but my thought with that was at the end we see how she sees things more vividly, and it made me think of the investiture of breaths.
Yep.
And stuff. Who has command on Roshar? Isn't we see Hoyd probably has breaths, right? We've assumed that, but that's
Who
That's
has
okay,
received a command on Roshar from Warbreaker?
Azure, Hoyd,
There's only a couple options. Keep going.
Vasher,
One more.
Nightblood.
There you go.
Nightblood.
What is Nightblood's command?
Destroy
Destroy evil. Okay? Does that help you at all? Capital C command is kind of a ambiguous definition in the fandom. We will get more of this at a future date, so I'm not going to, pull this thread completely and tell you that Nightblood is a Dawnshard, but I do want you to keep the capital C command and Dawnshard on the same in the same Venn diagram. That they're similar, and Rison is getting a capital C command from this Dawnshard to change. Capital C change.
Just to throw one more thought on that. We've just learned or been told, it's not in this chapter, maybe it is, I think it's later, that, but in Dawnshard here, that the Dawnshards, 4 of them, number, exactly 4, were also used to, I'm going to mess up the specific word, which I'm sure is actually pretty important, destroy Adonalsium?
Yes.
So we can kind of infer from that, Rison has just inherited that level of power of, capable of, again, I may be misusing some terms here, the original shattering of Adonalsium. Nightblood, we've gotten the impression from our various interactions with Nightblood that is like on par with what he's capable of.
Right.
That there is a destructive force within Nightblood that is like on the destroy gods level. I don't remember. Maybe this is just kind of what I've picked up across the course of events, or maybe there's a specific mention of it. I can't remember. But that's like what my takeaway from Nightblood has been. That's what Nightblood can do. So it does seem like we're talking about things on a similar playing field here.
Any other thoughts on defining Dawnshard before we keep pushing here?
I have another thought on the mural itself. Is this the right moment for that?
It is. And before you go head on this, what are the two descriptive words that Rissyn uses immediately with this mural, where before she even realizes before Nickley tells her what she's just done and absorbed a Dawnshard, what are the two descriptive words she uses about the mural?
Well, I'll tell you the two words that I walked away with. Maybe they're not the same as what you're going for, but the two that I keyed in on are the color and the use of gold on the mural, and then her description of heat.
Heat and light is what I'm fishing for.
Heat.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to key specifically into gold, which maybe is part of light. Heat and gold have been very intentional descriptions that we've seen before of odium.
Yes, correct.
When people interact with odium, they come away with like a searing heat. Like that's the impression they're left with, is this heat. And then he's always wearing gold. He's always associated with like this gold, lavish, luxurious kind of presence that's symbolized by gold. So I was at first, when Rissyn walked in the room and saw that, terrified that this was going to tie directly to odium. I can't tell if it is supposed to or not. I can't tell if like maybe heat and gold are tying back to like something higher than odium, even like the odium, heat, and gold are the same reference as this, Dawnshard heat and gold, or maybe they are more specifically tied together in that maybe odium and the Dawnshards are closer related than we thought. Maybe odium used the Dawnshards to do stuff. I don't know. Totally going down some rabbit holes here, but that was the connection I was thinking of.
I won't answer you any more than you should draw parallels between the two. They are deliberately similarly described. Did you guys notice the mention of the Cosmere by name from Nickley? I thought that was pretty cool. The only person who's ever used the Cosmere as a word before this is Hoyd. And the Sleepless seem to be on a similar playing field as Hoyd of defending the Cosmere by name and using that term with Rosharans who have no idea that they're not alone out here.
As I was reading through, that was what confused me the most. I was like, okay, what are they really trying to save the entire Cosmere from? Because, like, our concerns are saving our world here, right? Not, like, the entirety of existence everywhere or whatever, right? But I think that was answered later. I kind of took that as these Dawnshards, when used together, have the potential to destroy Adonalsium. It's like an even bigger thing. So that made sense. But at first, I was.
What's our first reference of Dawnshards ever?
The one I remember is at the very end of The Way of Kings. It's like, oh, you can't do that, or good luck defeating Odium if you don't have the Dawnshards, or something like that.
That's exactly correct. One of the video flashbacks from Dead Honor for Dalinar is, I believe it's Noadon at the top of destroyed Kolinar, and he's like, man, Odium sucks. Good luck. It's Honor himself talking through the person at that point and saying, Odium has killed me. Good luck destroying him. You don't really have a chance unless you find the Dawnshards. It's our first mention of Dawnshards.
Well, we have one now, so. That's good.
Rison and Cord have one, and they're sworn to
True.
secrecy. So I don't know if we really
Very
have
true.
one.
It'll come out at some point. We know where one is.
Yeah, we thought that about the Dark Sphere as well, and here we are, 3,600 pages later, and it still hasn't come back out. Just saying.
We saw. Wait, when did we see another mention of it? Because that was a big deal that we
They brought it back
crazy
up. Our characters have started to talk about it or mention it again. So we're getting a hint it may become relevant here very fast. But
it was tied to the King's drop at the end of Oathbringer is when it came back up.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
All right, we'll pause this for a second, and we'll get back to how we close this book with Rison here in a second. I want to talk about Lopen. And Lopen and Huyo have a fight on the beach. They're fighting this huge blobby great shell slug thing. And if there's ever a quote that encapsulates Lopen exactly perfectly, it is, "Please, gods of the ancient Herdazians, don't let me get killed by a monster that looks so stupid. Please." I love that. It's so funny to me. Do you guys like Lopen, or do you not like Lopen? Because if you like Lopen, you're going to like these chapters. If you don't like Lopen, you might just get annoyed.
I'm pretty neutral in the scenario of this. I've kind of isolated Lopen, and it's like kind of fun. I'm not like, whoa, he's hilarious, but he has some really funny comments. And I think before, when we asked about it, and Brandon said, you mentioned that Brandon Sanderson said that Lopen is just kind of the character that is always positive or joking no matter what's happening. And it's
Right.
like he almost dies, and he's like, wow, please don't let me die to something this ugly, he doesn't really have like serious moments, I guess. So I'm indifferent towards him. I would not put him amongst characters that I like, but I don't dislike him.
I think, to what you just said, I think we do get our very first serious Lopen moment in the epilogue of this book, which we'll talk about here in a second. But Eliot?
I'll say it this way. I love reading about Lopen. I think he's hilarious. I've enjoyed this story, getting to see inside Lopen's head. His jokes are pretty funny. He's the comic relief, and he does it really well. I don't know that I would be able to stand hanging out with him very long. I think he strikes me as the kind of person that is fun to have around. Sometimes they bring the life to the party for sure. But maybe this is just me speaking as an introvert, that these kind of people are kind of exhausting. Like, keeping up with someone like Lopen in real life is exhausting. And as the story actually kind of touches on, not always a positive experience either, which Huyo and Lopen have to kind of reconcile or talk about a bit here.
But both Huyo and Lopen's third ideals tie to Lopen's personality, which I think is kind of interesting. So.
But I do love Lopen. Actually, he is a favorite character, and that I very much enjoy reading about his antics.
I just thought of this. This is just a very side note. If we redid the list of like our character lists on a scale of who do you want to hang out with or spend time with, that would change everything. That would change so much stuff.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I thought the moment that Huyo spoke his third ideal was kind of actually a heartbreaking moment for me. Like, I realized instantly in that moment what his ideal was.
Right.
And I was like, oh no, his ideal is that he hates Lopen. Like, that's going to crush Lopen. I think after processing kind of their discussion, I don't remember if that's in the epilogue or where it is, it seemed a little more nuanced than that there's some subtlety here. It didn't seem like it was necessarily like Huyo hates Lopen and he has to get over that. Like it was more of just a Huyo has to accept Lopen for who he is, or has to get past the kind of annoyance that Lopen is, as opposed to like a, oh no, Huyo actually hates him sort of thing. But it was still kind of like a crushing moment of like, I realized in that second what they're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, I didn't realize it until Lopen confronts Huyo about it. So he's like, so Kaladin, Teft, and Sigzil's third ideal all had to do with hating something. And you just said the third ideal defending me, so you got something to tell me? That ties into Lopen's third ideal, like shortly after that. What did you guys think of Lopen's third ideal? I really think it's kind of cool.
It's interesting, and it showcases the flexibility maybe of the oath system, the ideals system, and that, you know, in classic Lopen style, he's out there like, you know, every couple of days shouting, I will protect those who I hate to the sky, just in the off chance that he'll get that third ideal. Like that's just kind of how he rolls. But that's not what it is for about him. It's more about, you know, what he has to conquer on his own journey. And what Lopen has to conquer is not really a hate of anyone else. It's not really a, I don't like this person, I have to protect them. Or like in Teft's case, he has to, you know, accept protecting himself, right? Standing up for himself and that side of thing. Lopen has to accept the fact that he's maybe not quite as likable as he thought he was. It's almost like, I will protect those that hate me, almost.
Right.
It was almost what it came down to. And again, hate's a strong word there, but it was more of a, Lopen just had to realize kind of the effect that he's having and the way he's treating other people, and he has to kind of move forward in that. So a very different version of what our other Windrunners did.
It is. I like how it's unique to our different characters here. I didn't know that there would be that much like flexibility with the words. Like when we first saw it with Kaladin, I think that was one of my very favorite moments that we've read ever. Like I thought that was an incredible. Like I was shooketh. While listening to that. In this, like I think it's accurate in like how Lopen's character is, but I wasn't that big of a fan of it. I felt it like discounted some of the others. Like it didn't feel that weighty of like if it really was. I think because there wasn't that strong of like a hatred for people, like right, like whenever we saw Kaladin say, it was whenever he was saving Elokar, right?
Yep.
Like
Against
we knew
Moash,
there
yep.
was there was a lot of ill will and feelings there, like very strongly, and this just does not compare emotionally
Right.
for me, and so I feel like it's just a much weaker version. Like my honest opinion, it felt like it just wanted to get our other characters to have a shard blade, so they could play the ball game.
I understand that. I think the punch is for Lopen, where he realizes that if he goes through life making everybody the butt of every joke, he has to accept that actually can hurt people, and I need to protect people from myself sometimes. That I need to hold back and not push everybody down all the time, even if it's just jokes. That can be actually be hurtful. I think that's where the punch comes for that. If it is it as epic as I will protect those I hate, you know. Whatever.
Yeah, that's true. I like how it kind of worked in conjunction with Huyo's, right, like he kind of had this moment of protecting Lopen and getting his third ideal, and that kind of, I feel like that kind of gave Lopen the realization of his impact on others, which I thought was really cool. I did like that a lot.
I agree. I agree also that his third ideal here, it maybe isn't on quite the same scale of epic as, a Kaladin ideal or a Teft ideal, but that also seems fairly appropriate for Lopen. He just doesn't seem to, operate on that level. He's much more in the moment. He's much more, joking around. So for him to have a personal moment here where he has to, examine himself a little bit, it also felt, even though it was smaller in scale, it very much in line with, I think, kind of where Lopen is at and the role that he fills.
Anything else for Lopen? I want to talk about Cord here in a second, but anything else for Lopen? All right. So up until now, Cord has been our luck spren guide. She can see all the spren everywhere. She can give a little bit of insight towards the sleepless, towards Cheery Cheery, and they show up in this underwater chasm, and she sees Shard Plate, puts it on real quick, and then is there to defend Rissyn. There's a couple cool one-liners from Cord to unpack here. I really like Cord as a character. So what are you guys' thoughts?
She seems really driven by that Shard Plate. Like, she'll drop everything just to get a set of Shard Plate. And I think earlier on in the journey they talked and were like, Cord, what's your motivation for this trip? And she's like, treasure. And
Yeah.
you were kind of waiting for that to be a joke. And then it's not. Like, no, she's actually here for Shard Plate. Like, that's all she is trying to do here, which that's what Rock was doing originally as well. Like, he left the Horneater Peaks simply to get Shard Plate for his people. I still don't think I understand, even with the little bit of information we've gotten here about the Horneaters, why are they so bent on getting Shard Plate? I totally understand how powerful it is and how important it is and how disadvantaged they are that the Horneaters don't have any Shard Plate and the other cultures do. But it seemed like for now multiple people to have left the Horneater Peaks with like no other quest other than to simply attain Shard Plate is, I don't know, odd.
I thought this didn't actually make sense, I guess. Like, I think a lot of people in our story aren't really in the same mindset as the characters we're following, right? So people in my head, people in the Horneater Peaks have been just trying to get Shard Plate or Shard Blades for years, because they're the only nation that doesn't. And we hear from Cord here how it kind of feels that they're not respected, or like people won't bother like trading with them, or just kind of like almost feeling like they're the country that was picked last at recess, like
right.
they're kind of a little out there, and wanting to do that. But I think getting like a set of plate and blade is just like still thinking back, it felt way more significant in the Way of Kings, right?
Sure.
But like the fact that it's worth like a kingdom, right? Like
it was back in the Way of Kings. I don't know if it still is.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Right.
But in my head, this may not be true, but in my head, our Horneaters are probably still sort of like that. Like some places may not know the depth of what's going on with all the radiance and stuff. They definitely, it's not less. It's less of a deal now, but
so I think it's actually the other direction here. So for years and years and years, what's the deepest, darkest Horneater secret that they don't tell anybody unless you're drunk and Rock tells everybody?
The perpendicularity.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time before either the Voidbringers or the Knights Radiant decide, hey, this perpendicularity would be really, really handy to have. So even before the Way of Kings, the the Horn Eaters have decided we need to be a player on the Roshar stage. And how do you do that? You go win some plate. So that's their motivation, is they need to be able to defend themselves against the Voidbringers, the Knights Radiant, that are, it's just a matter of time before they come for Cultivation's Perpendicularity, which they've been tasked with defending. So that's the motivation there. Does that help at all?
Think so. I still wonder if there's a more specific reason, like if there's some task they're trying to achieve that requires, shards, and they can't ask for help from anybody else because they can't reveal that they have a perpendicularity, whatever it is. But to do whatever they feel like they need to do, they need shards. It seems like that's where this is headed. Now, maybe the answer to that is like you're implying, that they just want to defend their land. I'm a little more suspicious than that, maybe.
Sure. And Horn Eaters are way more investiture aware than the rest of Roshar is. They know what aluminum does. They know that shards can resist aluminum and what aluminum does to Spren and all that fun stuff. And they can see Spren that most people can't. So they're way more aware of that. And they can maybe understand the implications of an investiture powered armor better than someone else could.
Another mystery, maybe, about the Horn Eaters. And I've been trying to look up the quote and I can't find it, but the reference, there's an offhand reference that Cord makes about other gods. She's like talking about the Sleepless, and we've learned that she like has had interactions with them before, or her people have had interactions with the Sleepless before, and she it's like, oh, you can't trust them. The only way out of their clutches, you have to trick them and things like that. But she also sort of mentions like, we have experience in making treaties with other gods, and then just like moves on. And I was like, whoa. What? You have experience in treaties with other gods besides these Sleepless things? What all is coming out of that perpendicularity up there? Like what? We've learned that they know about aluminum. They know lots about Spren. They know about Sleepless. Oh yeah, those Sleepless guys, we know about them. Like, what else is there? What else are we going to come across that the Horn Eaters just like, oh yeah, those guys, we see them every few months. They pop out of our pool and chat, and we make deals with them, and then they move on. Like, dude, there's a lot going on up there. That was my takeaway from 6 words in one sentence.
I have no further input besides, yes, I agree that there's something fishy going on up there at the Horn Eater Peaks that I would like to know about. Maybe Rock will tell us in Rhythm of War.
You better. Or better yet, we need to go there. We need to actually have our characters travel there and see what's happening.
Yeah, I'm done to take a vacation.
Go sit at the nice little poolside resort up in the top of the Horn Eater Peaks.
Yeah, exactly.
There was actually a section that I was going to read.
Go ahead.
If we've still got some time here.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to like Cord, one-liner drops, she has a pretty big one here in the middle of this conversation here in this chapter. And she's actually talking about Rock, her father. And it's now making me wonder about him even more. And this scene is where Nickley has come out of the water and is kind of facing down Rysn. And Cord like challenges him to a duel. And Nickley's like, What's going on? Yes, fine, I'll duel you. And Cord responds with this. And I'm going to read some Horn Eater names here, so I apologize right now for my pronunciation.
Just ask Paul to translate.
Yes, I will. Ha, she asked. Or she said, "You have been tricked, God. I am Hualinam Luna Akiakilu, the daughter of Numuhuku Makiaki Aina Lunamore, the Falala Likinor, who drew the bow of hours at the dawn of the new millennium, heralding the years of change. If you were to kill me, you would be violating the ancient pact of the Seven Peaks, and so must now forfeit the battle." Kind of goofy and epic, and Nickley again responds with like, "What?"
Nickley looks at her and says, "Excuse me."
I do not care. Yeah.
And
But in her little epic challenge there's some nuggets you can pull out of there. None that make any sense, but stuff we can write down on the I want to learn more about this. She's talking about Rock as if he's some legendary figure from history who drew the bow of hours at the dawn of the new millennium. What? Is this the same Rock that cooks stew and just kind of chills and encourages people and doesn't really do anything? Oh, fighting? No, I don't really do that. Or
Airsick no lender.
Yeah, exactly. I just sit here and make fun of people. Are we talking about the same guy here? Now I'm really, really intrigued. What has Rock done in his past that Cord is referencing here?
I'm glad you brought this up because I noticed that kind of right away. Because we knew he had done something with archery, right?
Yep.
We knew he knew how to shoot a bow, right? Because that was the whole thing in the Way of Kings.
Yep.
And we were just kind of offhanded, but this seems like it has bigger implications.
He also snipes Amram in the chest and between the eye slit of his armor from Thalen City, 300 yards away. He snipes Amram with a shard bow and kills him through the exposed gem heart and through the slit of his armor. He's a good shot. So whatever the bow of hours is, who knows?
Seriously. And what the ancient pact of the Seven Peaks that Cord is apparently trying to trick Nickley into violating here. One, sounds important. Again, what are those Horn Eaters up to up there that they have this pact with gods and creatures and things? But then two, why does Nickley not know what she's talking about? Nickley is a sleepless who has access to this horde, hive mind thing of these people who've been around for the impression we've gotten is many, 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 many years. Is Cord making stuff up? Because why does Nickley not know what she's talking about? That's my other question.
This is kind of funny. So I thought this was going to be a super huge relevant reveal, and Nickley was going to be like, "Oh my gosh, you got me!"
Dang it!
Right?
Yeah,
not this again.
Oh my gosh, the dawn of millennia, whatever, bow of hours, and then he was like, anyways, and stuff, which I actually thought was hilarious. And also very Horn Eater fashion. I could see Rock doing the same thing, and all the Bridge 4 guys being like, "Thank you, Rock. Does anyone want to do this or whatever?" But I don't know what to make of it, other than I'm sure it's a very big, important Horn Eater tradition or event that happened. But I'm curious to learn how much actual significance there is with it. Because they refer to a lot of stuff in the Horn Eater Peaks. But I don't know how much of it we kind of take it with a grain of salt. And we're like, oh, it's probably not anything big.
I think there's three options here. Either one, Cord just made all of that stuff up. And she's just going down this path of the way you defeat Sleepless is you trick them. And so she's completely spinning this ridiculous thing to try and catch him off guard. That's option one. Option two, she's telling the truth. Rock has done some epic things and changed the course of history. And however, it didn't impact the greater Roshar, so Nickley doesn't really know about it. Or three, Nickley does know about it. And he's pretending in this moment that he doesn't. And he's like, yeah, whatever you whatever you're talking about, crazy person, let's get back to business. Kind of like sweeping it under the rug a little bit. And maybe he does know exactly what she's talking about in this history. Either way, most of those options end up with Rock as a more impactful character than we thought he was. Or at least I thought he was.
It's true. Who actually saves the day as opposed to Cord's threats?
Cheery, cheery.
Cheery, cheery. So she comes back, and Nickley explains that she went to bond a Luxbrand herself. Cheery, cheery did. She comes back into the room, into the smaller room, and just lets Nickley have it. Little yappy dog over here trying to defend Rissyn. And it works. Nickley's gives greater pause to what Rissyn's trying to persuade him of, because Cheery Cheery's defending Rissyn, and Rissyn was granted Cheery Cheery for a reason. And he reveals that there are 3 known Larkin that are mature and alive on Roshar. We've seen 2 of them. Cheery Cheery. Who's got the other one?
I was trying to reason this out in my head. The other one we saw was in the hands of Nail, our Skybreaker Herald.
Yes, Nail has the other one. There's another person who has a dead one. Do you remember a dead Larkin showing up somewhere? This was the beginning of Words of Radiance.
I remember hearing about this, but that was like before we even knew there could be a live one, right?
Actually, there's 2 dead ones. One, not Gavilar, Elokar has a dead Larkin just kind of in his office on the Shattered Plains. 2 is Maraise of the Ghostbloods. He has a dead Larkin just kind of chilling in his trophies on the Shattered Plains, in both Words of Radiance.
I actually did not remember those 2, either one of those 2. But maybe subliminally I did, because I was trying to theorize who might have our 3rd Larkin, who's going to come out of the woodwork with a surprise, I can drain all your Stormlight. The group of people that I would guess fit that bill would be Ghostbloods. Like if the Ghostbloods showed up with, oh yeah, and we've also got a Larkin, I wouldn't be surprised. But now you're reminding us we've seen a dead one in their custody already. Maybe that's more evidence that they might also have a live one, perhaps?
It's evidence that they at least pay attention to it enough to trophy it, right?
So yeah, who has the other Larkin? There's now a question I want to keep an eye out for as we go forward.
And assuming the Sleepless know about Nail's Larkin, and that's one of the 3 that we're counting here, Nail's Larkin has not matured enough to come back to Aomia. They're saying that Cheery Cheery is the only one who has returned to Aomia to bond a Luxbrand and grow physically from that. So you guys remember when I told you that sucking in void light made her sick? That is kind of true. I kind of lied to you. That might feed into her maturity of that might have pushed her into, I need to go back to Aomia to bond a Spren territory. But it's whether that's a causation or correlation, that's the question.
I'll never trust you again.
Yeah, you're welcome. It does appear that Cheery Cheery can grow like, full dragon chasm fiend size, so that's pretty cool.
That seemed to be the reference at the end, or the implication that Rissyn's like, oh man, Cheery Cheery's going to grow to be huge. How am I going to handle this? Like, great question. How are you going to handle that? Now I'm going to picture Rissyn riding into battle on the back of Cheery Cheery, the full-size dragon Larkin, wielding her mind Dawnshard as she destroys Odium in the final showdown.
Oh my gosh. No, that I forgot about the Dawnshard part too. Like, she just flies in, sucks everyone's Stormlight. No one gets to play. She's the only player in the game now. Uses her Dawnshard powers and says, like, I don't know, I command you, Odium, to poof out of existence. And he poofs out of existence, and then problem solves.
Sanderlanche Book 5.
Yep, there we go.
I do want to take this and kind of tie it as we're approaching Rhythm of War next week. You guys are finally approaching Rhythm of War next week. We're zooming out of our little novella here that's a voyage to Aemia. What is the state of Roshar going into Rhythm of War based on this book? We have a Dawnshard, which we have found, Rysn has found, but there's a couple. What's the final contract between the Sleepless and Rysn, and how does that affect the greater Roshar?
Rysn is teaching the Sleepless how to be more human, right?
Yes, she
How
is.
to act more human. And there was another part of it, right? Well, she's pretty much sworn to secrecy, or these like lies they kind of have in place when people ask, like, "Oh, how was your trip to Aemia?"
Right.
She's like, "Well, great. We had a lovely time, and we got all these gem hearts or fabriols or whatever they are taking back with them, and leaving it there."
And the greater geopolitical landscape we're going to step back into is basically our heroes control half-ish of Roshar, and the singers control the other half, including about a half-ish split of the Oath Gates. We've got Odium, who's been dealt a bit of a blow by Dalinar's perpendicularity, awesome glowiness, whatever you want to call it. But we know that Odium is not gone.
Odium is certainly not gone. And Odium has agreed to a contest of champions. Do you guys remember that? So halfway through Oathbringer, Dalinar says, with that this is advice from Honor himself, from Tanavast. Dalinar says, I challenge you to a contest of champions, and the entirety of Roshar is at stake. And he agrees to that, thinking that he's going to have Dalinar be his champion. He has groomed Dalinar from his youth with the Thrill. He's going to present Dalinar with the Thrill at Thaylen City. Dalinar's my champion. Oops, you guys don't have a champion because Dalinar was going to be your champion. I win. Game over. Dalinar refuses that. Now, the contest of champions has yet to happen, and Odium has agreed to it. There is a lot of merit there. Okay? Now, going back to the end of The Way of Kings, Tanavast saying, you guys should probably find some Dawnshards if you're going to have a chance. We have just found a Dawnshard. However, the Sleepless still have it, pretty much. Like, Rysn has it in her head, but she's sworn to secrecy. Cord is sworn to secrecy with a couple caveats of, if you want to tell someone, ask us first and we'll talk it with you, because they know that humans want to talk about things. So if you want to confide in someone, come talk to us first, and we can maybe let, maybe Dalinar, maybe Kaladin, people of importance in on this secret if we think it'll help. Because the Sleepless are still much on their own side, and they're going to make sure the Dawnshard is safe at all costs. So that's where we're at right here. Any predictions on if this is going to play in Rhythm of War, or if this is going to wait till book 5 or anything like that? Up until this point, Rysn has gotten one interlude in each book, and now she has her own novella. So is she going to get a customary one interlude in Rhythm of War? Is she going to be bigger player? Is all of this going to pause until book 5? Predictions?
I think Risen as a character is going to be more involved in our story, but I think if there's a reveal to our other significant characters about her Dawnshard, then that is either going to... I think it's going to be in book 5. I don't think it's going to be in Rhythm of War. If it is in Rhythm of War, it's going to be Sanderlanche time, like end of the book, into part 4 or part 5 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm guessing this is going to follow the model set by Lift already, where Lift got her own little novella, and then she entered the story in that she's not in interludes, but she like kind of pops in and out, kind of here and there. And even with Lift, we've been told that Lift has a very powerful ability that seemingly no one else has. She has this sort of like immunity to odium that no one else appears to have, that would be very important, but we haven't really seen that like come to bear yet. And so I'm wondering if Risen's going to kind of do the same thing, where Risen is going to be, okay, now we know she's super important. She's carrying to something really valuable. She'll probably start showing up a little bit more, but I don't know that she's going to come, front and center in this very next book. So I'm with you, Paul, either end of book 4 or book 5, as I think where this is really going to become relevant.
The immunity to odium part is interesting because part of this pact that she pulls with the Sleepless includes you are not allowed to become a Knight's Radiant. You are not allowed to bond a Spren. So our discussion from last episode, as far as this deal that's just been struck, is fairly obsolete. That she's not allowed to bond a Spren, even if a Spren is trying to bond her.
So one thing I will say on that, it was made clear in these later chapters here that Risen can't really wield the Dawnshard. It's talked about how you have to have like the power of a god in order to wield. You have to have that. This is back
You
to
have
that.
You have to be Sabron, basically.
Right. You have to have reached. You have to have reached a height of mental power, or
what was it, like 1,000 breaths or something like that? Yeah.
Investiture. You have to maybe perhaps reach a certain level of awareness or investiture or something. You have to be able. You have to have godlike powers in order to wield this thing. Like that's just how powerful it is. So as of right now, Risen is just kind of like the embodiment of it. She's just the vessel.
The vessel.
I know that has other implications that maybe are incorrect here, but
right.
She can't do anything with it. So the Sleepless still have a lot of power over her. So when they say, "Hey, you can't become a Radiant," she better not become a Radiant. However, if something were to happen and Risen could figure out how to wield this thing, I get the impression there ain't nobody in the Cosmere that's going to get to tell her what to do at that point. If she could somehow achieve that level of investiture or that level of power, if she has some sort of a level up moment, if she were to bond a Spren of special magnificence to become a cosmic power, and she can wield the Dawnshard, I don't think the Sleepless's little embargo there is going to matter anymore. Now, maybe it doesn't go down that path, but maybe it does.
It just begs the question of why am I not allowed to become a Radiant, right? Like, which would lead you to assume that, if I get investiture, if I get, 4th ideal, 5th ideal, eventually, could I then wield the Dawnshard? And that's why the rule is there.
My first guess is that it's simpler than that. It's that the Sleepless want to control Risen, so they want to be the only power in her life. Whereas if she bonds a Spren, now there's another influence there. There's a voice in her head. There's another being out there that has an agenda or has that might talk to Risen about, hey, maybe you shouldn't trust the Sleepless. You should go do this. I think the Sleepless just don't want that in her head. That's my first guess. But yeah, maybe more practical reasons of that maybe unlocks some power that they're really worried about, or maybe that would give her the ability to actually summon a physical object or weapon of a Dawnshard and wield it. Like, yeah. Risen, I commented on this in our some of our Discord channels of our early look stuff. I think Risen just went from side character we really didn't care too much about or think was going to be important to perhaps one of the most important characters, period. Maybe.
I agree with you, but I think Risen will become one of our most important characters, but I don't think that's going to happen for a while. So I'm kind of maybe where Renarin sort of was before we started Oathbringer. I'm kind of having that thought, like, and I don't know how. I don't think I knew Renarin would be that important going into Oathbringer. I don't remember, but right now I'm like Renarin has to be a major player going forward, and that's like what I'm maybe most curious about moving forward. But Risen is definitely on that like tier now, like with Renarin, of like we know they're going to be integral in some capacity to the conclusion of our like storyline. But when will that happen? I'm afraid not this book. It seems like a end of the storyline breakthrough to me.
Sounds good. Pushing into Rhythm of War, whose point of view chapters are Rhythm of War? Do you guys know?
You told us Venli, right?
Yes, Venli. And during the draft, Brandon Sanderson switched it from Eshonai to Venli. So there's a couple actually Eshonai point of view chapters. That specifically flashback. So like when you The Way of Kings is Kaladin's book, but you get Kaladin flashback chapters. In book 4, we're going to get Venli and Eshonai flashback chapters. So if you go ahead.
And Elliot, don't let him fool you too much. Remember, none of our characters actually die. So we will find out. We'll see Eshonai current day, and she'll be like, "Whoops, I was just sleeping," and then she'll be back.
You stole timber from me. Give her back.
Yeah, exactly. That was my spwen.
Wouldn't be surprised.
And just to give you guys a little bit of a refresher on where Venli is, she has just sworn life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination at the end of Oathbringer. That is the first ideal of the Knights Radiant. And she has housed Timber in her gem heart, coexisting with the Void Spren that is in there. She didn't kill the Void Spren, so she still appears as a Void Spren singer, but Timber is also hiding in there pulling the strings. To give you some reference on where Venli is for you guys.
So Venli's gonna... I don't know if y'all have seen that meme. Venli can either be our Angle or our Devel. She's gonna be like light and dark. I'm sorry. It's just a really low quality thing. Of like the angel on one shoulder, demon on another shoulder kind of thing, you know.
Okay.
All
right. Any more on Dawnshard before I read something out of Oathbringer and give you a little bit of a mic drop before the end of the episode?
Just a tiny quick mention. I will say that I really enjoyed this book, and I actually really enjoyed Risen's character as well. I really liked her journey, her struggle with that imposter syndrome, Trevor, that you mentioned a bit ago, that she kind of has to face, and her battle with her physical disability and her mental agility with having to do these negotiations. Like, she is clever. She is smart. She has come a long way from that first, immature girl we saw who was frustrated having to carry grass around with her. Like, for not a lot of screen time, we've come a long way with her character, and I've really enjoyed it. I think she might have just risen, but into my top five characters out there. So she's a new favorite going forward.
Cool. All right. Question for you guys. in the two places where Rissyn describes the Dawnshard. What does she describe it as? We already talked about it briefly, but what are the words she uses?
The heat and light.
Heat and light. And then after she absorbs it in the epilogue, what happens to her? What seems to be happening to her?
She sees things more vibrantly, hears things more vibrant. Like she can hear music in the voice of what's his face, and colors seem more vibrant and stuff. Gave me a lot of the Warbreaker breaths, heightenings energy.
All right. With that context, I'm going to read an excerpt from from Oathbringer. I'm not going to give you any context. You'll have plenty of context from the first line of where this is in the book. You cannot have my pain. Dalinar sneered at the god. If I pretend I didn't do those things, it means that I can't have grown to become someone else. A failure, Odium said. Something stirred inside Dalinar, a warmth that he'd known once before, a warm, calming light. Unite them. And one more. The very last page of the book, before the epilogue. Most importantly, Dalinar could write this: his thoughts, his pains, his life. He looked to the side where Navani had placed the handful of blank pages he'd asked her to bring. Too few, far, far too few. He dipped his pen again. Would you close the balcony doors again, Gemheart? He asked her. The sunlight is distracting me from the other light. Other light? He nodded absently. What next? Prevailing theory contradicts mine, unfortunately. Do you guys remember the theory that I gave you of a fourth shard present on Roshar that Silverlight doesn't know about, named Unity? The Dawnshard that Rissyn has picked up is titled Change. Brandon Sanderson confirmed that. There is a theory that Dalinar either has the Dawnshard Unity and doesn't know about it, or there is a Dawnshard Unity trying to talk to him and telling him, unite them.
I dig it. I had a thought going into this book that Rissyn would become at some point one of our I'm assuming we're going to get another bondsmith at some point. And I was thinking Rissyn would become that other bondsmith somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But this is like that, but different. It's like they both are Dawnshards instead of bondsmiths.
I like that prevailing theory quite a bit. It does seem to fit. I do remember wondering about that light that Dalinar had mentioned a couple times. So a few pieces seeming to align there. I'm still struggling with where Odium fits into this. Why are these similar descriptors as what we get from Odium? Is this an Odium thing that are this, or is Odium like wielding another of the Dawn shards or something?
And this is me genuinely asking, does the Sabron ever have a description of heat?
No idea.
There's a good question.
Because heat may just be an overpowering of investiture. Like, there's a bunch of investiture here to the point where it's thermal.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, like, it very well could be that Odium has a Dawn Shard or something and, like, has the actual power to use it. And that's why we see such a big display of, like, raging heat and light. Because he's, like, where I would imagine of that level, right, of like, god status, you know, in power.
Maybe that's Odium's endgame. Maybe he's trying to collect all 4 of the Dawnshards. Maybe he has one or more already, and whatever he's trying to do, destroy the universe, who knows, requires all 4.
The main contention with this theory is, why don't the Sleepless have Dalinar locked up? Right? If Dalinar has a Dawnshard, why don't the Sleepless pay any attention to him? They could not know it exists if he has it, but they don't seem to be paying much attention to Dalinar.
What if Odium does have a Dawnshard? And that's the Dawnshard that's talking to Dalinar. What if it is a Dawnshard talking to Dalinar, but it's not like in him yet? It's still with Odium. But Dalinar's frequent encounters with Odium have given this Dawnshard a chance to reach out to Dalinar.
It's a good one. I like it. I've never heard it before.
Like, unite them, as in, like, if you unite the other Dawnshards, then maybe you could defeat Odium and therefore, like, free it too, like that Dawnshard, maybe. Unite them probably has a big plethora of meanings, like the people, the cosmic level of, like, these Dawnshards.
Maybe Adonalsium
the realms
himself.
Yeah.
Because if you remember back in The Way of Kings, the first time you hear Adonalsium, Hoid is talking to Dalinar and says, have you ever heard of Adonalsium? If you ever reassemble someone like a Odyssean Amian, name it Gibletish. That seems to be a direct reference to, hey, if you ever get around to reassembling and listening to unite them, if you name something, if you unite either, Adonalsium or Honor, if you unite Honor back together, it could apply to whatever. Who knows? Name it after me is what Hoid's one-liner there is. Anything else before we close?
I'll just
no
say
thoughts
I am
about
more
clothes.
Not about clothes, but I am more excited than ever to get into Rhythm of War. As usual with our little hiatus sees, it's been fun to take a break to go dive into some other, stories and characters and material, but oh man, I am itching to get back to our story and our big characters, and all of this has just kind of thrown fuel on that fire. I got to know where we're headed.
Sounds good. Before you know it, we might be Stormlight.
Current.
Thank you. That's the word. We're into Rhythm of War next week. We're not gonna stop until we're done. So
it's a long book.
It is a long book.
It's a long book.
Yeah, it took us 7 months to get through Oathbringers. So
9.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was. Yeah.
We got a little while yet, but we're close.
Oh man. Yeah. True. Like, honestly, we're coming up to, like, the year mark from when we started Oathbringer. So we've got a little ways. Is there supposed to be a novella or anything between Rhythm of War and Stormlight 5?
Yes. And it is titled Horn Eater.
Okay.
That's it.
Horn Eater.
Nice.
All right.
We'll get to learn about that bow of whatever.
Yeah, there's going to be our
moons
backstory
on the Millennium of Falcons,
All right. Thank you for joining me for Dawnshard, Paul and Eliot, and we will be talking about Rhythm of War, prologue through chapter 3 next week. See you guys then.
See you next week.
Yeast out.